day 4 of our investigation, and honestly at this point I'm starting to question whether or not we're making any real good headway with finding Emma. Seems that for every new clue we manage to find, it just leads us down another dark avenue in the seedy underbelly of Mizzurna Falls. I mean, last time we did manage to piece together that Kathy and Emma did meet up with Mel in some seedy motel room to score what I can only assume to be illicit pharmaceuticals. But all we know about those pills for right now is that they're called Epoch. We don't know the effects of the pills or why Emma and Kathy were trying to score some. But in turn, we also know that Mel is indebted to some local criminal organization, and more than likely, well, if Mel is in any danger from that criminal organization, anybody he has done business with is more than likely in danger from them as well. Couple that with the fact that we did have a conversation with Isabella, the singer from Bar Wolf, and she in turn was also in some danger from some unseen forces. That in turn also could have led to some danger being transplanted onto Emma, as Emma seemed to have a pretty close friendly connection, I suppose, with Isabella. Still, having been so nice to Isabella, she did give us this little tape of Eternal to listen to. Seems also she was giving us some hint that there might be some clues on that. And wouldn't you know it, amongst all the furniture in Matthew's room here, there is this little boombox where we can just happen to listen to that tape. Really though, there's not too much in the ways of clues in the song itself, though if you do want to listen to a full version of the song, you're more than welcome to. It is about 4 to 5 minutes, and if you are wanting to get some translated lyrics for that, they are up on the translator's YouTube page, though I will go ahead and give a link to that in the description on the video. I guess it's just nice to hear one additional piece of music in the game, though I do think that's also the song that plays over the credits, so I don't think that will be the last time we'll be hearing that. Still, with our morning ritual now done and behind us, it's now time to get our day started proper, and there are a few different things we can follow up on now. And I figure the most reasonable thing to follow up on is maybe heading over to the sheriff's department and seeing if we can't get a few more answers out of Mel. I mean, from where we left him last time, he should still be safely ensconced down in one of the cells in the sheriff's department. And he definitely has quite a few things that I think he should have some answers to. Before we can make our way too far over there, we do get an unexpected call. And a good reminder about why you never should park in the middle of the street. There is a very good reason to make sure and pick up this call, because from Winona we find out that Mel is going to be released pretty much right now, so well, we need to make our way over to the sheriff's station as quickly as we can. It's honestly not too surprising, though, for being the richest family in town. It does make a lot of sense that Mel's father is pretty easily able to post bail. Thankfully, it's not too long of a drive to get over to the sheriff's station from here. And once we make our way over there, we happen to stumble into another scene of what I can only assume to be familial bliss amongst the Astons. Now, we already did kind of pick up on the fact that father and son here don't really get along too well from that little bit that we were peeping in Mel's room. And I guess I can kind of understand Dennis's point of view here, because I think Mel is his only son and heir to the business. And at this point, we kind of get the impression that Mel doesn't care about anything outside of Mel. So it's not really hopeful on Dennis's part that Mel's going to pick up the reins of the family business. Though at this point, our concern is more about the fact that, Emma is still missing, and that Mel is pretty much a prime suspect in all this. It seems he still harbors a grudge against Detective Matthew for some inexplicable reason. It is pretty surprising, though, that I think even an option for bail was put up for Mel. It seems like it's been less than 12 hours, which to me is a pretty massive turnaround for someone being able to post bail. Not to mention that he is definitely a person of interest in the missing Emma, and also I would say in Kathy's death, even though there's still the whole fact that, the cause of her death is put up as shock by the local hospital. Either way, Morgan tries to make us feel a little bit safe by telling us that he is on the case, but as we've probably been able to ascertain at this point, there's not a whole lot of faith to put into that. Still, before we do leave the sheriff's department, there is someone waiting for us in Morgan's office that we do want to talk to. And no, it is not Deputy Hudson. He honestly is pretty much a non-entity throughout the course of the game. Instead, the person that we do want to talk to is the forest warlock named Cohen. Now, I'm not sure if we actually got the dialogue in the last day that mentioned that Cohen is actually ex-military. But it does kind of make sense with the fact that we learned from Sheriff Morgan yesterday that the reason that you can't get easy access to that tribal painting cave was because the military asked for it to be, blocked off for unknown reasons. That it would make sense that there is still an ex-member of the military in town. Even though he tries to paint it as he's being a forest custodian, it seems more in my mind that he's still on guard duty for, whatever the military had interest in regards to that cave. Still, he does also have some alternative reasons for, retiring in town. It is a pretty, quiet, serene place with a bunch of friendly people. If you discount the whole murder and drug trafficking that seems to be taking place here now. And he also does exude quite a bit of remorse and empathy towards the fact that he was not able to get to Kathy sooner. Maybe if he was 10 minutes quicker, she might still be alive right now. And Matthew, being the kind-hearted person that he is, tries to make him feel a little bit better. He did manage to get her to a hospital where she was at least, surrounded with care before she died, so there is something to that. But yeah, life is just chaotic. You can't really judge just based purely on age whether or not someone will manage to survive. If anything, though, I can at least hope that we can manage to find Emma before she becomes just another sad footnote in this dark chapter of Mizzurna Falls. For right now, though, there's not much else we need to do, at least not for another hour or two, so I figured, maybe I'll head over to the town square, take in some of this nice snowy weather, maybe even hit up the theater to see a quick movie. But another unexpected phone call pretty much puts a kibosh on that. And yes, it is a pretty good idea anytime that Matthew gets called that you make sure and pick it up because it's pretty much always going to be extremely plot relevant. Whether it be we learn the fact that Mel is being released from the sheriff's department, or in this case, we get a quick call from Dr. Samuel over at the hospital because he's managed to identify those drugs we gave him. For some reason, though, he's a bit curious about where we managed to procure them, and yeah, Matthew, he's not wanting to lay all his cards on the table. He doesn't want to give out that info just yet. Still, it really doesn't matter to Dr. Samuel. He just wants us to head over as quick as we can. And I am honestly pretty curious about those mysterious pills, so yeah, we're going to have to forego the movie for right now and go ahead and head over to the hospital. I am a little bit curious, though, why he couldn't just give us a little bit more information over the phone. Even a small hint would have been helpful. But all too quickly, we learn that the real reason is because he had an additional audience member waiting for his spilling of the beans, I suppose. Now, I can definitely start to make some assumptions here, considering that the police were called into this affair, that something about these drugs is definitely not on the up and up. We learn here that Dr. Samuel has something of a flair of the dramatic, as it seems like he's really wanting to milk this scene as much as possible before he tells us just what these pills are. As you can imagine, though, Sheriff Morgan does not have time for that type of nonsense. As it turns out, Epoch is a powerful hallucinogenic drug. The question is, why is there a powerful hallucinogenic drug available in Mizzurna Falls? And while Dr. Condescending doesn't really want to go into the full, gist of what the drugs entail, he is at least willing to tell us that the drugs were apparently very popular in the latter half of the 60s on the West Coast, which makes even less sense right now. Why would a 30-year-old hallucinogenic popular on the west coast of America now be up in the Rocky Mountains 30 years later? Well, if anything, Matthew is going to be able to shed some light on that situation, at least, I guess, elucidating how they might have managed to get into town, or at least within the hands of Emma and Kathy. Yeah, even though we kind of covered some of the items in Emma's diary with Sheriff Morgan, we didn't know at the time that these were illicit pharmaceuticals, so we didn't really cover the pill angle yet that we found in that motel room. But we're at least able to piece together now with some other people in, I guess, a position of power within the town that, yeah, Mel is doing some super illegal stuff outside of the armed robbery and, let's say, attempted murder after Matthew almost got shot twice yesterday. And yet again, Dr. Samuel definitely trying to discount the whole bear thing, but yeah, criminal mastermind bear, also drug dealer bears, strong possibility. Still, Matthew is really wanting to pin things on Mel at this point. He seems to have all these, clues pieced together that Mel, in some attempt to pay off, the drugs that he supplied to Emma and Kathy that he probably didn't get paid for from them. That's why he robbed the diner, that's why he was in trouble with Bonehead, and whatever other mysterious, criminal forces are going on within the town. And Morgan just throwing out all that due process stuff, warrants and all that, just says, fuck it, let's go arrest Mel again. Just because Matthew said so. which I'm sure is going to continue to be putting us into the good graces of Mel. And while Morgan is off arresting another teenager, I think it's worth getting a little bit more additional information about this West Coast hallucinogen. In this case, we're going to figure out exactly the side effects, I suppose, or the purposes of taking Epoch. And it seems to alter your sense of perspective, which doesn't sound too bad. And it makes you feel as if you are one with nature, which sounds pretty good. I mean, it definitely sounds like a hippie drug of the 60s. The problem is that there is always the possibility of having a bad trip. In the case of having a bad trip with Epoch, it's especially bad. Well, because you start to feel like the devil is after you, and that you are being consumed. Which is, I don't know, that sounds pretty familiar. So, I seem to recall that we heard, I think from Dr. James, that Emma was having some dreams about being devoured in some ethereal heaven-like state. And by the end, you doubt your own existence, which definitely sounds like something that Emma was having a existential crisis about. Now, whether or not this means that Emma was already taking the drugs and that she was reporting the after effects to Dr. James, or maybe she was just trying to get back to that state again, which seems a bit weird. It definitely seems very coincidental to what Emma was having to deal with. Question is, though, why was Kathy also trying to get to a similar place? I don't know. Just more questions to deal with. For right now, though, I do want to go follow up with Sheriff Morgan. Because he did seem really, really pissed off learning that Mel was dealing hallucinogens inside of his town. And in fact, this is one of the good opportunities to follow up with Mary Lou before following up with Sheriff Morgan. Because, yeah, we do find that Sheriff Morgan did decide to go through proper channels of protocol and issued an arrest warrant. The only problem is we have no idea where Mel is. I guess they might have checked on, Mel heading back to the Aston estate, but yeah, he definitely turned out to be a bit of a flight risk. And that left Morgan in a pretty pissed off state. Probably even more so than before. Mary Lou, for her part, though, does hope that Matthew is able to calm down Morgan just a little bit, and well, I think Matthew knows how to mind his P's and Q's. He probably approached this situation in a pretty mindful manner. But if anything, it definitely shows that Mel had something to feel super guilty about if he's on the run right now. I mean, you don't run if you're not guilty, right? Or at least not if you have something to hide, I guess. Sadly, it seems that Matthew decided to shove his foot in his mouth and be as forward as possible. And thankfully Morgan's not too mad at him. He's at least willing to cover with Matthew about the fact that they've been trying to think about some places where Mel could be hiding. But it's a pretty small town. There's not that many places to hide unless you consider, all of the forestry around the town. Matthew does kind of wonder if there is a possibility that Mel could have gone back to some of his old hideouts, such as the workers' lodgings, but Morgan thinks that's pretty not likely to happen. I mean, Mel's not a master criminal like the local bears, but You can't really be that stupid. Which, Matthew doesn't seem to really agree with. Still, Matthew doesn't really have much of a place to talk. If anything, though, Morgan is fairly certain that, Mel is not just going to stick to his own with this. He is going to have to get in contact with someone to get some assistance. And we do know of a definite person that has been assisting Mel throughout the game, and obviously that's not his dad. That's not the accomplice or bonehead. No, I think the one key person that he is probably going to assist him at this point in the game is probably going to be Lorraine at the diner. Things have definitely quieted down here after the attempted robbery yesterday. A bit surprised that there's not more of a continued investigation going on here, probably to get a more solid case against Mel, but what can you do? As you can imagine, though, Lorraine's not too forthcoming with any information about Mel. I mean, there is definitely the possibility that Mel has not been in contact with her, but there is also the fact that she did help Mel out with staging that robbery yesterday, so I don't really think I can trust her 100%. Still, we don't really have anything to accuse her with on not knowing where Mel is at this point, so at most we can just kind of go with the fact that she does harbor some anger at Mel for doing some really dumb shit. Thing is, though, that while Matthew does pose the idea that Mel is doing drugs, there is also the likely possibility that he is just selling them, not doing them. That's usually, from what I've learned, to be the safer way to deal with drugs, especially if you're selling them, is to not be doing them. Lorraine, though, is pretty surprised about hearing about the fact that Mel might be doing drugs. I mean, if it is something that he is doing, something he's only started to do recently. And regarding the drugs and being indebted to some criminal organization, the only thing that she knows in regards to the robbery is the fact that Mel just said he needed a large amount of cash quick. He never said it was for buying drugs. He never said it was to pay off somebody. All she knows is that she was trying to be, a good girlfriend by going along with her boyfriend's criminal activities. I don't know. Definitely a toxic relationship, in my opinion. But, Matthew is still pretty suspicious about Lorraine, and so am I, so we are going to be keeping an eye out on her, but just later on in the day. For right now, it's not something I've mentioned just yet, but there is one bright shining point in today, and that is, believe it or not, it is time for Barbara's birthday bash extravaganza. Though we are going to have to put a hold on that for right now. I forgot that I did intend to head up to Father Barton to see his feelings about learning about Kathy doing illicit pharmaceuticals. And I know some people in the comments have been stating that it's a bit surprising whenever, X character learns about something so quickly, but you have to realize it is a very small town. There are bulletin boards pretty much everywhere that seem to be updated by, I guess, some unseen reporter, and it always manages to have the latest scoops, such as Isabella getting shot, local priest's daughter doing drugs. So it's not so much that these people are learning it through, suspicious means. It's just a small town. That's all it is. Also, Father Barton at this point, has no doubts whatsoever that Kathy was the most sinful person in town and is just totally throwing her under the bus, which is a bit sad. Because honestly, Kathy was acting out a lot because I think of the way that Father Barton had been treating her before that. Still, with that sidetrack out of the way, it's now time to head... Well, not yet. We do want to head to the barber birthday bash upstairs, but first... Yeah, if you recall, we did learn from Dr. Samuel that Dr. James did have some knowledge about pharmaceuticals before going into the counseling business. And it does seem that he might have some previous knowledge about Epoch and its side effects, but he does kind of wonder about why he had never heard about Emma doing these drugs before. So that seems to lead me more to thinking that Emma was just having what were almost like natural, natural feelings or, natural brain functions that seemed like the side effects of Epoch rather than her having taken them before, but yeah, what actually draws Dr. James's attention here more than anything is the fact that Emma was keeping a diary of things going on in her life, and he didn't seem to know about that. Matthew is more than willing to spill everything he learned from the diary, though, namely the fact that Kathy was the one that said they needed the drugs for something or other. And that, more than likely we can assume at this point that the things that, Kathy was needing was the Epoch. And there's still the question of what they needed them for. I mean, at least it makes a little bit of sense in the case of Emma because she was already having some questions about reality and her own existence, but we didn't really get any impression of that so far in regards to what little we've learned about Kathy. I mean, it could just be that whatever familial issue she was having with Father Barton might have been driving her to try to escape from reality, but it seems like there would be a lot easier ways to do that. Yep, we also informed Dr. James here that Mel was the one supplying the pills, though Dr. James does pose the greater question of where did Mel get the drugs? I mean, we are talking about a 30-year-old, hallucinogen that was not available in the general area. Someone must have been supplying them to him. And that definitely seems like the criminal organization that he was indebted to, so definitely do want to follow up with whatever that group is. And there is definitely the possibility that the dealers of this drug, the larger cartel, I suppose, could be holding Emma hostage. And yeah, very well could be that Bonehead is some higher-up member of that group. He definitely seemed to be in contact with some higher-ups at least. So he seems like another person of interest that we do want to follow up on that we have not seen in quite a bit of time, especially after Mel got nicked by the local police. Still, with all that depressing drug nonsense out of the way, I think it is finally time for all of our hard work to pay off, to get into the party of the century within Mizzurna Falls. That is up in Barber's room. As you can imagine, it is very important that we do attend Barbara's birthday bash extravaganza. I mean, it's been pretty much the most involved and constantly reminded side quest of the game up to this point. And as you might recall, Barbara's not letting just anybody into the birthday bash. You do have to make sure and bring a birthday present for her, which does work out for us, because we did manage to pick up a big carton of smokes for her at the general store a couple days ago. So with that out of the way, it's time to finally indulge in Barbara's birthday bash. See what the big hullabaloo is all about in there. As you can tell, though, it's not quite... Well, it's exactly what you might have imagined for an elderly woman in a small town. Just her and her granddaughter really enjoying a little bit of time together, kind of being ruined by the teenager wielding a big old carton of cancer sticks. As you can imagine, Liz is not too super stoked about us feeding Grandma's horrible vices, but it's the only way we would have been able to get into this party to get some of that sweet, sweet information we were looking for regarding Emma. And while Barbara does agree that this was the terms of service, Liz is still not too super excited about it. And it's completely understandable. We are just probably killing this old lady a lot quicker than she needs to die. And in fact, Liz decides to call it an early evening and dip out of the party, though she is going to come by one other time before, she makes a little side trip over to the cemetery, and old cold Grandma pretty much sums it up with a simple bye, Felicia. So I guess in case we do need to talk to Liz, we do know where she is. She's going to be pretty close by. But there is a deeper reason why Liz just feels a bit uncomfortable and kind of off-putting right now. That's because not only is it Barbara's birthday bash, but it's also the anniversary of Liz's parents dying. And it seems that Matthew already knows about that. Probably just general town knowledge that Liz's parents died in some car accident quite a bit of time ago. And Barbara, as we've kind of learned before, is pretty pragmatic about things. Just death is a natural part of life, just something you kind of have to deal with. And it's, getting past that and surviving that's pretty important. She wanted to get that across to Emma, but she just didn't have time. Instead, Emma, as we already kind of learned previously, was just very much into, I guess, what comes after death. The ethereal, theological, philosophical standings of, what comes after when you die. And as we've already kind of learned, that was more something Dr. James knew, not so much something that Matthew knew. And in turn, it was that, thirst for knowledge about that afterlife that made her really fascinated with what happened, 40 years ago. And at this point, we still don't really know a whole lot about what happened 40 years ago. We just know it had something to do with Barbara, and that it was, I guess, common town knowledge, 40 years ago. And it had been something pretty newsworthy. And the assumption would be that, Barbara would be more than willing to share the information with us now that we gave her those cigarettes, we came to her birthday. Problem is, I kind of assume that Liz being put off and leaving the room also kind of made Barbara a little bit standoffish as well. So it seems that for all of our hard work, we are not going to get the information we were looking for, which is a bummer to have at Barbara's birthday bash extravaganza. I mean, we really can't press this old woman for information. It could easily lead to an early grave for her, though she does seem to be quite a fighter. If anything, though, she does want us to leave, and she does thank us for the cigarettes. She does at least direct us towards another avenue for information. And that's in the form of Liz. Yeah, well, she is still having to deal with a lot of the pain from that event from 40 years ago. And while Emma was indeed pretty interested with what happened, she does still kind of direct us to the fact that, Liz might be able to elucidate some stuff for us on that. Which just going to work out for us because, well, we do know where Liz is, even though she was not very much in the mood to talk to people. So while the Barbara birthday bash extravaganza was sadly cut short, that doesn't mean that our activities around the hospital are done just yet, especially not with both Barbara and Liz. Instead, we have to go to the second happiest place in town, the cemetery, to get some more information. Now, the good thing for us is that the cemetery is obviously not that big for such a small town. The main problem is the fact that Liz kind of blends in with all the trees here, so it's a bit hard to tell where she is on your initial journey here to try to find her. Yeah, all too quickly we do find her right in front of this grave here, and we can pretty easily put two and two together here to realize that this is probably her parents' gravestone. Must be pretty hard for, a parent to have to celebrate their birthday on the same date as, when... I don't know if we know whether, which one of Liz's parents was the direct relation to Barbara, but either way, it must be pretty terrible to have to celebrate your birthday on the same day as the day one of your kids dies. And also, it's probably hard to deal with on Liz's part, having to deal with crazy old Grandma Barbara and also the death of her parents. Thing is, though, that it honestly seems like Grandma Barbara's teachings have kind of sunk into Liz here, and much like Barbara is pretty pragmatic. Yeah, Liz has the same thought process. Death is just a natural part of life. You kind of have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going. Otherwise, you'll probably just be dead too. Liz also kind of questions here whether or not Matthew has probably some religious background, has any thoughts about life after death, but he probably just honestly doesn't think about it that much. He doesn't seem like the philosophical type. So his idea is just, you die, that's it. Thing is, we do know at this point that Emma was definitely in the realm of, there is life after death, there has to be something more to it. And even more so, she was dealing with some ideas about the supernatural probably being a part of that post-death experience. Maybe not something as simple as, reincarnation and being reborn in another form. But Matthew, for his part, has no idea where she might have gotten those ideas from. She obviously never really spoke about them to either him or Winona. Liz seems to think it was probably some want to escape from her day-to-day life, but at this point we haven't really gotten an impression that Emma's life was that difficult or that full of strife or anything. It wasn't like with Kathy, where she clearly had a strained relationship with Father Barton. So I'm not really sure what she was trying to escape from in that part. I mean, there could always be something deeper there. Either way, though, Liz is very much in the camp of, you only have one life to live, you need to live it to your fullest. You don't need to worry about the after without worrying about the here and now. And I guess it's good we were able to get some common ground on that. We definitely don't leave a sour taste in Liz's mouth, especially after kind of having the whole birthday bash go south with our gift of cigarettes. Still, if we do check the tombstone after Liz leaves, we do find rather oddly that she left behind her phone number on the tombstone here. Not sure if that's actually a deeper message for Matthew to maybe give her a call later, but it's at least another phone number for us to add to our ever-growing list in case we need it. But as the day is growing shorter, we do need to head back to the Barbara birthday bash because, as Barbara mentioned, it is worthwhile to check up with Liz to try to get some additional information about the incident from 40 years ago. And obviously there are still time constraints here because, Barbara could go to bed early, Liz could have to go do something at the school or at home. So, we are definitely, as always, pressed for time here. But, yeah, the good thing is Liz seems to be, I guess, at least somewhat willing to follow up with us on some information. And it is a pretty large bombshell that we learned here from Liz. 40 years ago, there was a murder in the town. And this murder wasn't just of some random citizen in the town. Nope, it was someone pretty close to Barbara. It was Barbara's little sister. Now, that's not the only noteworthy thing about this murder. There were some other additional factors in it that really gained Emma's attention. Namely, the fact that whoever committed these murders did them, well, let's say for ritualistic purposes. It seems that whoever was trying to commit this murder was doing it in the name of a supposed devil. And yeah, Emma seemed pretty invested in that. Bit disconcerting to hear that your friend is not only suddenly dealing with drugs and hanging out at all times of night, stabbing people in the thighs with forks at the local bar. Yeah, she was apparently very interested in the afterlife and devil worship. Whoever this murderer was, he was killed off in the forest around this exact same time of year 40 years ago, trying to commit some ritualistic murders. And yeah, this is all starting to sound very familiar to what's going on right now. Still, to get even more information, we do need to make a pretty large detour over to the school library to get some additional information about what happened on that New Year's Eve 40 years ago. Definitely does start to feel like things are falling more and more into place regarding the fact that whatever happened in the forest was not an isolated incident. Initially, though, I thought this was a computer that just was missing a keyboard, but I actually think it's one of those newsreel lithograph type of machines that, some older libraries still have, where you can look at older copies of newspapers. And it's from here that Matthew is pretty quickly able to find the information he's looking for. I assume ritualistic, satanic murder was very much front page material back in, I guess, the 50s or 60s. And it was performed by a gentleman named Cougar who was attempting something called the Death Journey Ritual. It seems to be some ancient ritual done by the indigenous people of the area, which definitely makes me think we could follow up with Dr. James a bit more on that. It seems, though, that Cougar wasn't intending to leave Barbara's sister fully dead. Instead, was hoping to, I guess, revive her and give her immortality. It's a bit hard to piece together. I'm honestly assuming that the local newspaper was just riding on the wave of satanic devil worship here, rather than going into the full backstory of the Native American ritual. But yeah, Cougar was just trying to gain some immortality via Barbara's sister as a guinea pig. Honestly, a pretty unexpected turn in the story, I must say. I was not expecting devil worship to come up. But there's already been so many other twists and turns in the story. In the end, though, Cougar ended up killing himself in the forest. I guess he had kind of assumed that Even though the ritual with Barbara's sister had failed, maybe his could work, but yeah, definitely does not seem to have been the case. And especially with all of Emma's concerns about life after death, the idea of a ritual giving immortality definitely seems like something she would have a lot of interest in. Probably an unhealthy amount of interest. Still, we do want to go follow up with Dr. James about that ritual, but we want to make one more stop back at Barbara's birthday bash, because there is just a little bit more information we can follow up on from all that. Namely the fact that something we learned from the newspaper there was that Cougar was living at the church. And while this was the church, 40 years ago, it seems that, well, the proprietorship, I'm not sure what the ownership of, a particular priest over a given church is supposed to be called, but it does appear that it seems to have run in the family, because the priest 40 years ago was just Father Barton's dad. Which means that Father Barton actually might have some prior knowledge, maybe even a deeper connection to this mysterious Cougar person. Now, I assume that maybe Father Barton was more, of a teenager at that time, while Cougar was in his 20s. But it easily could be that Father Barton might have been impressionable and, soaked in something from being around this clearly disturbed gentleman. Now, I do want to apologize, because you're supposed to actually talk to Barbara a second time after this initial discussion, which unlocks a further discussion later on in the church. I did accidentally miss out on that, but basically what's supposed to happen is you go to the church, talk to Father Barton. He says, "Oh yeah, I don't remember anything about that." He's kind of a dead end. But what you end up doing is talking to a nun at the church, and after giving her a quick donation, she reveals that Father Barton not only had some documents from Cougar, but apparently burned them recently, so definitely seems like he was trying to hide something there. All in all, though, it does start to make a whole lot more sense why Emma was trying to learn more about Cougar, the death journey ritual, and all this want for immortality, because she was having her own existential crisis about what happens with life after death and all that. Barbara, though, was really trying to impress on Emma the fact that you need to focus on life, not death, not what happens after death. Your life is what matters. You don't need to have your head in the clouds about all this philosophical stuff. Your life is important. Problem is, it was a little bit too late for that. Seems that whatever was going on in Emma's head, she was already pretty much dead set on doing it. And pretty much at this point, I almost want to say I've started to raise a little suspicion about the fact that what happened with Kathy was more all of Emma's doing. That if there's some more nefarious thing going on, it's entirely due to Emma maybe trying to commit this death journey ritual with Kathy. I never really even thought about the fact that maybe it wasn't someone that did something to Emma. Maybe Emma is just in hiding because she knew she did something wrong. Definitely a lot to consider. Definitely another very, very dark puzzle piece to put into this picture that we're getting of Mizzurna Falls. Still, before we call it a video, and after the excitement that was the Barbara birthday bash extravaganza, I do want to go follow with Dr. James, since he is right downstairs, and even though he wasn't a lot of help with like the cave painting mural or quite a few other things recently, I do definitely hope that he can give us some more information about this death journey ritual that Cougar was so incredibly involved in. And the good news for us is that, Dr. James, believe it or not, does have some pretty in-depth knowledge, I suppose, about this murder that happened 40 years ago. Don't know why he wouldn't have brought up the, coincidental matchings between what happened a couple of days ago and what happened 40 years ago, and the fact that they seem to really be matching up date-wise. But I think what is even more concerning is the fact that he knew that Emma was having these existential crises, these questions about her own existence, and he didn't really bring up any of this to the police, and the fact that it probably might have some connections with the, ritualistic way that Kathy was found, and that large tree out in the forest where Kathy was found. There's too many items here that makes you think that Dr. James should have really brought up some of this stuff. It could very well be that he's just trying to protect Emma, that he feels like Emma is in a very fragile place right now, and it might be just a protection of Emma. But I don't know. There's just too many points of suspicion for quite a few characters right now that's really hard to pinpoint down anything. But yeah, Dr. James does know that the death journey ritual, its basic intent is to try to give the person doing it eternal life. Obviously, that is complete nonsense. There's no way to get eternal life in reality. Though Dr. James kind of goes a weird direction with it here and agrees only in so much as, not eternal life, but you can probably get maybe 400 years. Which you can already kind of assume, and you correctly assume, that Dr. James is just fucking with him. Which has, pretty much been a staple of Dr. James throughout the entire game. Though I do think it's worth, mentioning that, if you look at some stories from the Bible or something like that, there's times when, they'll say Methuselah lived hundreds of years, but I think it's more of a case where they didn't have a concrete way measure weeks or years and things like that. They just had, the sun setting and rising to measure time. That, the idea of a Roman calendar year to a Native American, I don't think it was really something they had a conscious effort to try to match. And what's more troublesome, at least to Dr. James, is the fact that people just, they seem to want to grab onto these ideas of the fanciful, even if they completely, spit in the face of common sense and reality. And honestly, I feel like his sarcasm and his cynicism, at least the way that he expresses it to Matthew here, if he expresses that in any way to his patients, it's probably super confusing to them, and especially in the case of Emma, it might have led her down some pretty dark roads. Still, with all that out of the way, a lot of information that we've gathered on the first half of Day 4 here, and I think this might be a good place as any to call it a video. Hopefully you will join me next time as we head into the final half of Day 4, where hopefully we get even more revelations about the story. See you then.